I grew up on the east side of Lower East Side in the Italian and Jewish community down here. And pretty much was, in a sense, not only being young or 16 or 17, 18 years old, being, in a sense, provincial in a way, and also young and naive and coming from a family of hardworking people who never had a book in the house. So I learned everything from visuals, whether films on television, films in theaters. And I was taken to the movies a lot because at 3 years old in 1946, I got asthma and I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. I couldn't, specifically sports. I couldn't run or, get excited. My parents, they were working class people, didn't really understand. The best they could, they would put me in a room. And the imagination really is what I had to rely on, along with that with storytelling that I heard from my parents and from my grandparents and from some people around me, and cinema, movies, all kinds of movies, and drawing, a lot of drawing pictures, really, little pictures, really. The point being that right around the time of coming from a very enclosed space, in a way, almost in a negative way, you could say coddled, but on the other hand, you got sick. You couldn't even laugh because the laughter sometimes would be, you get spasm, and you turn blue and your parents would go crazy. So in any event, by the time I decided to go to Washington Square College at that time, which was NYU, it was only, and I always tell the story, I went to Houston Street. I was on Elizabeth Street between Prince and Houston. The next block over on the right was the Bowery. The block after that was 2nd Avenue, and basically I went to the corner of Houston and Elizabeth and made a left and walked 6 blocks, and I was in another world. A whole world opened up to me, the whole world, not just, we had heard of this place, America, but that was more of a, Eisenhower playing golf. We didn't quite, it was not a understanding of, my people came out of the Depression and the way many others, and they were formed by that kind of thinking. And the late 50s, the early 50s became kind of a boom in a way, an economic boom, and things were getting better. They turned from Democrat to Republican, but in any event, when I went to that first day of meetings at NYU, orientation, I saw that there was a program that dealt with, was called TMR, Television, Motion Pictures, and Radio. And every teacher, the head of each department got up and spoke about their classical studies, physics, etc. And then when this TMR person came up, a man named Haig Manoogian, he came up and started speaking, and he spoke so fast and with such passion and intensity that I realized this is where I belong. Now, having said that, because most of the information of the world was coming through images to me, and also discovering foreign films, not American films, but foreign films, particularly having seen, and this is the biggest impact, I think, when I was 5 years old, on television, having seen the Italian neorealist films, Open City, Paisan, Shoeshine, and Bicycle Thieves, and seeing the relationship of the people in the frame on the small 16-inch TV speaking Sicilian or Neapolitan, and the people in the room, my grandparents who didn't speak English, spoke Sicilian. They were the same people. And there was this country that had gone through war, and cinema became, I don't want to say two things to me, but they can be both. You see, it can be Wizard of Oz and it can be Open City. Now, so, this is an extraordinary thing. And also in the late 50s, New York was bubbling with incredible cinematic activity. Primarily, you got to remember, the studio system was still in. It was on the way out, but it was still in. And you really never got to make, there's no such thing as making a feature film in New York. Stanley Kubrick did one, Killer's Kiss, maybe another. And there were a few other people, Arthur Barron, who did Blast of Silence. But at the same time, Shirley Clarke was coming around, and John Cassavetes, and this sort of thing was happening with the American avant-garde, the New York avant-garde film, which also included narrative film, which was exemplified by Shirley Clarke's The Connection and The Cool World, but particularly by Cassavetes' Shadows. And so it made us feel that with the right equipment, particularly 16 millimeter at that time, we could make a picture. We didn't need a studio. We didn't need a Mitchell BNC camera. We didn't need big movie stars. We didn't need this. This was now a possibility, you see. Particularly the short films that were being made. And the avant-garde was very important. Stan Brakhage, Ed Emshwiller, Amos Vogel, Cinema 16 with the Mikas brothers. I mean, this was, you may not be able to make films like that, but this was like a universe that had opened. That doesn't mean we didn't love the Hollywood films of the past. In fact, they were still a mainstay, but we could do something on our own. And so I having prior to that been more aligned with, I thought, Catholicism, and I tried for 1 year in a preparatory seminary, in which I was finally invited to leave, as they say. I realized halfway through, I said, this is really more than what I thought. This is a commitment that maybe well, what had happened too was that there was this young priest, Father Francis Principe, who was 23 years old or so at our diocese when I was 11 to 18, those years. And he was the one who brought the outside world to us. He was the one who said to us that you don't have to live like this in ignorance, in a way. Not that he was putting down the people around us, but there was a certain, I think, looking back at it now, the immigrants who came over from Sicily, particularly my families, they basically needed work, and they made families, and they needed food on the table. That's as far as they went. And he said, no, there's another world out there. And he would give us books by Graham Greene or Dwight MacDonald, which was a radical point of view, classical music, and particularly, he loved cinema, like Westerns. But we disagree mainly on most of the pictures. But still, he had a way of working how one should live the right kind of life, morally, in streets that were really terrible. Really tough, because the whole area was also seeped in, it's just the nature of it, steeped in a kind of organized crime, and so I grew up within that. Having said that, I realized that I wanted to be like him. I thought he was great. And you just can't go to, you can't make a commitment of a vocation, so to speak. You can't make that unless you are fully committed to that. And you can't go into a place like that and think you're going to do it and make a life that way. And almost in my own mind, step away from the world. In reality, he's in the world. He's working in the world. He's working in the streets. The motivation for doing that can't be because I want to be like somebody else. You could take that as inspiration, but then you have to find who you are, if you can, and how you could take that inspiration from that guide, so to speak, and project it out into the world through what you do. And so suddenly, when I saw Higman Nugent get up there, it all clicked. And I had also seen so many films. I would go to the Strange Theaters up a Broadway and 97th Street and things like that, and see Russian films, Yiddish films, Jacob Ben-Ami and Edgar G. Ulmer. I mean, I saw the Dybbuk back in 1957. So and also Green Fields and pictures like that, The Singing Blacksmith. These were things, a whole other world opened up. And also at the same time, I was seeing foreign films on television. I always tell the story about Pather Panchali, which is the Sajid Ray film. I saw it first on television. They would show it on once a week. They'd show a foreign film on a local station in New York, dubbed in English. And what I learned about it, though, I was looking at it and I said, this is fascinating. I said, the thing about this is that the people in the movie are obviously the people I usually see in the background of the movies made about India by French directors or British directors or American directors. And this obviously is made by one of them, about them. And this was a whole world. And suddenly all that French films, Japanese, all of this opened up. And at that time, too, you have to remember, there weren't the amount of films that we have available now to see, it's infinite almost. At that time, basically Asia was Japan, Japanese films from 1949 on. European films, basically, and British films. Hardly anything else was available. So you could find a way to do research in a way. You call it, looking at films, I call it research or whatever, and opening these different cinemas around the world and exploring them and being inspired by them, and also, of course, learning about, or at least, how should I say, curiosity about the rest of the world and knowing other cultures, knowing other religions, knowing other kinds of thinking. This was the key, mind-opening. So you add all this, and this guy gets up and speaks like that. And I started taking regular courses at NYU. And by the third year, middle of the third year, I made a first short film. And that received some awards. And you have to understand, my parents didn't understand any of this. They thought one night we were living in Elizabeth Street, and 3.5 rooms we had. And my brother had gotten married or whatever. And I heard them saying, I think he's crazy. I think he's crazy. There's no such thing as making movies. Movies, we come out of the Depression, Warner Brothers, MGM. What is this? I think there's something wrong with them. But we had that. It was a new world, and the key to the whole experience at NYU at that time was the belief that Haig Manoogian had. I had to say, and a few people, but particularly me, and how he made us think. And he was not gentle about it, I must say. He was like a drill sergeant at times. He was very tough with us. But he knew I had something, and I didn't know how to express it yet. But the right guide, you could call it professor, teacher, instructor, the right guide who sees something in a student, she or he, and say, that's interesting. I hate all that other stuff, but what about that? Who are you? What are you trying to say? And how are you going to go about and say it? Look at all these tools you have. Well, I want to learn how to use this machine. Don't worry about the machine. Don't worry about that device. You got something to say? Do you have something to say? Well, you're only 18 years old. But still, you might have something to say for an 18-year-old. How do you want to express that? Well, I want to do it in black and white, and I want to do widescreen. Forget that. How do you want to express it? So this is the key, and it's a long answer, but I think I know the students are out there, and I want them to understand. I came from a place where there was, I had to learn how to read myself, really, and I found the way through encouragement, but also belief. And once he believed in me, my parents, not that they were against it, they were concerned, as they say. They began to understand. They came over to the school. They started to hang out there. They wound up in the movies, too, because I needed extras, So my mother wound up in all my movies, pretty much. My father, a few of them. But, it became very real, very real. Does that help in terms of...
Inspiring. I wanted to ask also, because kind of tying up the ends that you spread out, when you get into fiction features and with that generation of quote unquote new Hollywood, there's again a lot of reflection about film history and the specific